Yeah. Good. Now, let's see. Oh, we go. Okay. With Isaac, like we said, is where we really see how much this covenant gets put in danger. Right, what you have in front of you is called the Akedah. Okay? And this is the Hebrew word for binding. And if you guys just want to look together. Akedah is the Hebrew word for binding, and this story gets referred to as the binding of Isaac. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to read through this story on your own. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do this, but as you're reading, what I want you to do as well, on like a scrap sheet of paper, is write down questions. Right? Who's not saying something? Where are there gaps in the story? And not gaps in kind of negative ways, and like, oh, they left something out, but just narrative spaces, right? As if the narrator's taking a breath, and when the narrator starts talking again, you're like, wait, but what about such and such? Right? Think about who's not talking, who is talking. Right? What's happening? Maybe there's some kind of gap between what's happening and what comes next. So take a moment, read through, and make some notes about those gaps. What gaps did you guys find in the text? Spaces where you thought, like why doesn't it tell me anything here? Anything? Yeah.
Excuse me. I guess I was thinking more than actually trying to incorporate anything in the text. But it said, after these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take your son. It kind of confused on who is he, because he keeps saying who is he. But it says, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love. But if you read the Bible, he don't only have just only one son. So why did he refer to Isaac just his only son?
Right,
because it was by Sarah, or because he's the covenant, or because he would promise something? I mean, what was it?
Good question. Come back to it. Yeah.
At the end here, he says, I forget what verse it is, but he said, I will indeed bless you, and I will make your offspring as. I think I messed up.
Verse 17. Yeah,
That's okay.
17.
Verse 17?
Yeah. No, I messed up in my interpretation. I meant to say, who will bear the offspring, but he already had the offspring.
Oh, okay.
But another question I had was, why did Abraham not try to? Question God about why he would try to kill his son. I mean, if that was my son, I think I'd try to talk him out of it.
Yeah. Why is Abraham so complicit or compliant? Why does he just go along with this?
My question though was, why was Isaac being so passive about it? He was just like, tie me up and like stab me. I thought that was really weird.
He didn't really like know the plan. He was like, where's the lamb to kill?
Well, I mean, how did he all of a sudden like, you know, like end up on top of the altar and bound and stuff?
It says Abraham.
Can I add on to
He's
this?
like deceived.
No, he doesn't.
All right. Yeah. No, but that's good. How did he, being Isaac, end up there, or end up on the altar?
I had one more.
I'll come back to you. I want to keep going around a few more.
Along with Isaac,
Uh-huh.
I want to know what Isaac said when he was being bound.
Yeah.
He just like, okay, Daddy,
All
that's
right,
fine.
Okay,
Abraham was obedient.
And what
to
did he
God.
say afterwards?
Isaac was obedient. It was a chain of obedience.
Good. What did Isaac standing there? Before and after.
My dad tried to kill me. I believe I tried to stop him.
What else? Yeah.
My question was kind of like why God would need a dead kid or a dead ram. Because
Right.
like it just doesn't
Good.
seem like he would have any use for that.
Why does God even ask this?
It's just random. Just give me a dead animal.
Good. Why does God ask? Why does God require this of Abraham? Yeah.
My other one was, like in the very beginning when God told Abraham to go, like remember he told us there was like no stipulations or whatever,
Uh-huh.
and now all of a sudden like God, Abraham wasn't even aware like he was trying to prove himself or something, and now all of a sudden like, since you proved yourself, I'm going to do this, that, and the third. Whereas,
Okay.
I guess he'd already said, I don't know, like repeating himself, I don't know.
Okay. So is this a stipulation? Is this God requiring something of somebody he didn't require anything of before?
Right.
And then can I say
Because he
something?
had given him the promise, he wanted to see if he would still trust him.
Okay. So that would be a maybe
Yeah.
for that. Yeah.
Back jumping up back to verse 2,
Uh-huh.
it's like, he's like, take your son, your only son. Like, it's almost like a taunt kind of to see, are you really going to do this or are you not?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, so that's a why. Good. Any other narrative holes? Yeah.
I don't mind crazy, but the guys, the two men he had with him, why they didn't say, man, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you
Who
doing?"
are these two men? What are they doing?
Obedient
They didn't have a voice.
They entertained.
Yeah,
It was Sarah, I said, that's what I said, that's what I said, who was the go-to?
Like the end,
That's what I said though.
the end after he's like, your offspring shall all the nations, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
And 19, he's like, so Abraham returned his young men, and they arose and went to Beersheba. It's just random. It's like Beersheba, like all of a sudden just going to this place. Because he's always been kind of like directed since that. Like God told him where to go, and he's like, oh, I'm going to go here. And just like randomly. He doesn't say a reason for it, or who he's taking with him, or if Sarah's even going, or if her kids are going.
Yeah.
It's just like all of a sudden, it's just like,
He just did what
just
God
there.
had to do.
I think I heard somebody mention it. Where's Sarah in this story?
yeah.
I heard somebody, yeah, where did she run off to? Why did she not have a voice in this? Right? So lots of good questions, right? And this is a text that has been poured over and poured over. Just out of curiosity, and we'll kind of take just a couple of these, and I've heard some suggestions already. What were some of the ways that you filled in these gaps? You thought of like creative ways?
I'm trying to look at them and figure out
Okay.
what I want.
Some kind of creative ways you filled in the
Well,
gap.
my creative way, when he said, my only son, I was thinking because of Ishmael being, just promised the land,
Mhm.
and him actually being a covenant that he would have to sacrifice him for that covenant. So my thought was the reason why he would take Isaac, him being his only son, because the purpose was originally for Sarah and Abraham to have the child, so that would be considered his only son.
Okay, so possibly saying only to emphasize,
Right.
emphasize Isaac's place in this,
Yeah.
Like,
right? Good. What else?
Yeah, when he said like chain of obedience, that made me think like ever since God told him to like go,
Uh-huh.
Abraham has been kind of like no questions asked, like just do it, and he doesn't ask any questions, he just does it.
Good. So we have.
I probably wouldn't.
But this is.
Being talking to me from the sky.
Right.
I would question my sanity.
But no, but this is a good point. And this is where, and we'll see how Jacob kind of bumps up against this idea. This is where how obedient Abraham is, you start to wonder, is this really what we want by faithfulness? Right? Is this really what we want? Is somebody who's so willing to even sacrifice their own son, something that is completely condemned in the Israelite religion? Is this what we mean by faithfulness? Right? And so the text is kind of starting to ask that question. Is this what faithfulness looks like for the Israelite religion? Yeah.
It make me question, like, why he didn't take Sarah to do it instead of taking him? Like, did he feel like Sarah was gonna be like, you're not killing my son?
Yeah. So does Abraham purposefully not? Does he never tell her? Do they leave early because it says that they leave early? Did he just?
Freak it out.
Yeah.
Would Sarah usually have gone on these kind of things, or would that be a thing females back then probably would not?
She
Oh,
might.
yeah.
Usually, sacrifices were only done by men.
Right.
So that's a really good point. But why wouldn't he have said anything before? But yeah, like she's not trying to stop it. We don't hear anything from her. Does she even know? Let's kind of move on from these, just because I know there's like tons of ways that we can fill in these gaps. Just kind of looking through some other questions here. Is why would God require child sacrifice, especially if that's something condemned in the Israelite religion? Is this the kind of God that tests people? Why test someone that has already done so much? Also, what's interesting, do we have one where to ask this? Right, why is Abraham so compliant? For example, when Ishmael, when Sarah tells Abram to send away Hagar and Ishmael, Abraham is not down with that and laments and causes a whole kind of fuss that Ishmael is being sent away. So why is he so complicit here?
Because it was God's command.
Yeah, in a sense, so this is why we get back to faithfulness.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so why is he so willing to comply? The text says that he was very distressed when he tried to send Ishmael away. A big question that has been asked of this text is this a text about child sacrifice? I'm just going to say CS, right? Is this a text about child sacrifice? Is the text trying to make a claim about whether child sacrifice is a good or bad thing?
No,
It's
more of a-
still, it all centers back to faithfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Your
all
faith
like
and your
ultimate
trust in
It's a
God.
test.
You know, because he supplied, he had the ram in the bush, so it's just his faithfulness.
In
Okay.
verse number 2, it gives you a little hint about it, because it says, take your son, your only son,
Mhm.
whom you love.
Yeah, yeah.
We want to see just how much that love was there. We
Right,
want to see
yeah.
if the love was just about getting the son, or if the love was for God as
God,
well.
yes,
So he implies this in, in that. And because, Abraham got to, know right away when he says,
Okay.
offer him there a burnt offering, excuse me?
Right.
You know?
Well, so this is part of the question. Is it acceptable within the Israelite understanding of faithfulness to perform a child sacrifice? Is it? But this is what God is asking in the text.
Right,
I think it's
yeah,
more of
yeah.
You could say it's
Right?
probably like a representation is like, what's a father's like most prized possession would be their kids. So it's like, would they give up the ultimate sacrifice for God
Right.
more than like a
That's the
child?
ultimate,
Where it's like,
yeah.
everyone, that's the ultimate thing for him.
Yeah. But still, we get this question of: is the Israelite understanding of faithfulness one that permits this?
And this, I mean, it's what God asked for, you know what I mean?
And that's
It's
very
like
much culture.
And so we would have to say yes, but for the Israelite religion, they're going to say no, don't ever sacrifice people. So we've got that difficulty. One thing that may help us really understand this text is if we shift our focus from Abraham to Isaac, and make this a story not about Abraham's faithfulness, but about Isaac, right? So, and the reason it's hard for us to do this in this story, to shift our focus, is because, like somebody said, Isaac is so silent and passive, right? We don't hear a peep out of Isaac. And actually, in the text in general, right, in the biblical story, Isaac does almost nothing, right? If we look through the rest of what happens with Isaac, he's born, right? So he gets that. He gets one line in this whole story, right? One little phrase. After that, we get a story of his marriage. He does pray for his barren wife, so at least he does that. So we get to hear from him there. We get to hear about him moving around, but even when he's moving around, he's doing that because other people are saying, no, you can't be here. And so Isaac's like, okay, I'll move. Right? So even in that, he's kind of passive. He doesn't like put up a fight against that. He eventually gets somewhere where nobody fights him on it, and he stays there. And even in his big moment of blessing, right, the thing that the father is to bless his children, that gets stolen from him, from being like, in a sense, a moment between him and Esau to being Jacob's story.
But God seemed kind of cruel too in this thing.
In the story, for
because
sure.
He tells him, when he calls Abraham from God, this in 12, he says, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now, I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, for me. So
Right.
it just seems like he kind of leaning.
There is that cruelty. Yeah, no, and that's what makes the story really difficult, right? No, and I think this is what's important when we read the biblical text, is to let the text be new, let the text be strange, not to be like, oh, of course God's loving, or just like have these little like fuzzy notions. When we start really wrestling with what is in this text, it makes it much more difficult. Is it okay if we move on a little bit? Okay, I just want to make sure. So if we focus on Isaac, right, which like I said, is hard to do because he is so passive and so silent, we start to see this text in a new light. And how we start to see it is focusing on who Isaac is and not what he does that's important. Right? Who is Isaac?
That's what, like, these stories are like the Israelites' identity and how they view themselves. And I almost feel like the lineage is like their maturity as far as like their relationship with God or whatever. Like, whereas at first they were compliant and whatever he says goes. And then when we get to Jacob, now they're like wrestling or, with God or whatever.
Okay.
So maybe it's like the embodiment of their identity in Isaac being really passive.
Okay. I think there's definitely something to be said in each of these characters kind of standing in for Israel's identity. I don't know if I'd see it necessarily chronologically, as first they were like Abraham, then they were like Isaac, then they were like Jacob. I think it's more that all of these are kind of coexisting at the same time. But if you were to say who Isaac is, just like in one like tiny little phrase, who is he?
Son of Abraham.
Son of Abram, right? Abram, yeah, Abraham.
He sacrificed for his own self.
He's the son of Abraham. But in even a more important way, because so is Ishmael. Ishmael is also the son of Abraham. We could maybe more importantly say that he is the son of the promise.
And who is that, Ishmael?
Isaac.
Isaac.
This is Isaac. Isaac is the son of the promise, right? It is on Isaac. It is Isaac on whom everything about the promise rests. Without Isaac, there is no children, no progeny. There is no people to inhabit a land, and there is no blessing. Without Isaac, there is none of this. Right? Everything that God has promised hinges on Isaac.
It can't be all the way though, because the verse I read you guys, it told Ishmael that he can be fruitful too.
Yeah, so there's that blessing harkens back more to a little bit more to Genesis. It's saying being fruitful, I'll make you a great nation. So there's a little bit of a promise there, but like the covenant promise.
Chosen one.
Right, that chosenness. Remember our two themes?
Yeah.
That God has a purpose and a plan for history, and it's the Hebrew people that are chosen to carry that out.
That's
resting on Isaac.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Isaac is the promise. So what we have here with the story of the binding of Isaac is the story of the promise endangered.
So that would be like Satan's work.
Again, that's kind of importing Christian ideas back onto Old Testament texts. Yeah, we're not dealing with Satan. Because what's interesting here too, kind of to clarify that, is whenever Israel comes under attack as a people, it is always interpreted as God sending this other army to punish them for something they've done. Right? And so in the same way, it's not Satan or any kind of evil force that is putting Isaac's life in danger, but it's God himself. Right? It is God's own action that is, in a sense, putting this promise in danger.
So basically, like redoing what he said forth.
What's that?
Is he like redoing what he said forth? Like he promised Isaac to be the covenant, but he wants to sacrifice Isaac too.
Well, think about this from the point of view of the Israelites, okay, who understand themselves as the sons of the promise, right, the people of the promise. And yet throughout their history, time and time again, it seems like they're going to be wiped out, right? So they see, at each point in their life, oh, we got invaded by these people, we're now in exile, now we're sent back, right? This idea is like, we are the promised people, but it seems like this promise is continually in danger. And so in a sense, we can see the end of that story as Israel trying to be hopeful that they're not going to be wiped out, right? Almost like Israel saying, we are the people of the promise, we are endangered, and yet we know that we have this relationship with God such that there will be some kind of way out of this. There will be some kind of provision to keep us from being wiped out.
Isn't most of the time when they get in danger though, it's because they've fallen out of like touch with God or whatever?
Yeah, for sure. So that's not in here as much. But so that's what's interesting here with Isaac, is that whereas Abram and how Abraham represents Israel's identity is through what he does, right? Through that kind of faithful action. Isaac's identity and how he represents the Israelites, the Hebrew people's identity, is through who he is, right? And so Isaac very much represents for us the promise endangered, right? As you guys wrote. This is the part of Israel's identity that they see through Isaac's story, that they narrate through Isaac's story. Right, and so at the end of that story, like we said, or as you read in the Akedah, God provides this lamb. Right? It says, no, sacrifice this lamb. And so in a sense here as well, we have this idea of Israel's return to Yahweh, Israel's return to God, Israel's being saved is also marked by this sacrificial act, right? So through ritual, through the cultic life, right? Through the idea of sacrificing to God, right? So we have this sacrifice at the end. Oops, sacrifice. Right, at the end of the story. Right, so Israel is now hopefully being brought out of danger through the provision of God. And that is marked by sacrifice.
Okay.
You guys are right. Isaac is a very passive character. And so it's interesting that he's counted as one of the patriarchs. Right? Usually we think of like if you narrate history through great men, or as history typically does in its own patriarchal kind of way, it's about what those people do. Right? Oh, George Washington did this, Abraham Lincoln did this, George Washington Carver did this, right? You have these great men doing great things. And so it's interesting when we read of a patriarch in the Hebrew text, this great person, doing almost zilch. And so that's why it kind of begs the question, why is Isaac important to the Hebrew people if he does so little? And it's because of that, right? It's because his emphasis or his importance is more on who he is than what he does.